Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back at the second session of day 2 of the Dutch Blockchain Week. Sorry, we were 5 minutes later. We were working on the video connection with Dubai, but everything is set, so we are ready to go for the upcoming session, which will feature 3 speakers on impact stories. Because after all the financial things, the regulation, the stories about the Dutch government and so forth, we are very keen to learn, where does blockchain technology have a positive societal impact? We have 3 thought leaders joining in from Dubai, Africa, and New York, telling about their impact stories. So we're very curious to learn what they have learned in the past year in their own environment. First speaker today is Mr. Marwan Al-Zarouni. Mr. Zarouni is an internationally recognized blockchain technology advocate. He is CEO of the Dubai Blockchain Center, which aims to create a fertile ground and a holistic ecosystem for blockchain companies to thrive in. With the ambition of the Dubai government to actually become the global blockchain capital, we're very keen to learn what's going on in Dubai and what is next for this country. Mr. Al-Zarouni, welcome to the virtual blockchain stage.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to this presentation and letting you know what we are doing in Dubai.
All right, please take it from here.
Let me go to the slides. The whole idea today is to show you what we can do with this technology. And despite all the hype and all the talk about how blockchain is life-changing and all this build-up, what we try to do in Dubai is actually through imaginative leadership and initiative show the world how we can actually navigate this new technology and have projects that, even if they seem impossible, can actually be done if we have the right leadership, the large idea of what to do. One of the examples of what we do in Dubai is something called the Ministry of Possibilities. What we found out in the UAE is that a lot of times there is a problem that needs to be solved, but there is no entity that can address it without stepping over the toes of other entities or other ministries. So what we created in the UAE is something called the Ministry of Possibilities. It is a ministry without a minister, which means that any minister can step in to solve a problem. It means that anybody can suggest solutions for existing problems, and we can bring different ministers, different thought leaders, different entrepreneurs, startups, and even the citizens, small and big, to actually come and discuss the problem and together trying to solve what seems to be impossible by bringing the right people to the table in a very organized, systematic way. And this initiative, which is called the Ministry of Possibilities, is in the same building where we have our Dubai Blockchain Center, which tells you that the UAE has this leadership of solving problems together in an environment where everyone comes together to solve the problem, not just throw blame. And in the same ecosystem, we have something called Area 2071. And Area 2071 is a manifestation of the UAE's Centennial Plan. And the Centennial Plan is to make the UAE, and Dubai more specifically, the leader in everything by 2071, by 100 years from the formation of the UAE, the leader in happiness, the leader in technology, the leader in innovation, in all aspects of life. And this includes government, corporate, startups, investors, and everyone that can bring success in this kind of vision of making the city the best city in the world by 2071. There are opportunities for startups to discuss ideas. We have this website, which is the Dubai Future Accelerator, where if you have a startup that needs to be incubated and wants to tap into that ecosystem, please connect with us. And the QR code there you can scan to go to that website as well. The Dubai Blockchain Center was created in May 2018 with the same vision to make UAE the leader in this space and to have tangible projects that can be kicked off where we utilize the technology, not for the sake of utilizing technology, but for the sake of solving real-life problems. And Dubai, from the very beginning, set a very, very ambitious record. And today, we are in the final days of this blockchain strategy, which actually we have succeeded in. We made every single possible blockchain use case within the government feasible by 2020, which was done. And there are reports that are published by us and the World Economic Forum to showcase some of these projects to the world. We have also published another publication last year to share our experience with the whole world. And it's a free publication available both in electronic form in many languages, including Arabic and English. And it basically showcases what we've done in Dubai when it comes to blockchain and what lessons we learned and what is the outtake from this technology. What we realized from trying this technology in Dubai is that blockchain brings three main, advantages or three main use case realizations. And one of them is for record keeping and notarization. The other one is smart contracts, especially with Solidity and Ethereum, and also Hyperledger from IBM, as well as value exchange, which is mostly cryptocurrencies and other, for example, land deed exchange and other digital value exchanges without the reliance on third parties. We're using, for example, peer-to-peer transactions on something like Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency blockchains. And what we've realized from trying this technology at different sectors and also asking people within these sectors, what we realized there are some sectors that are better suited for this technology and where the impact is really high in them. One of those sectors that has high across the board at the three different areas that we discussed before, it's financial services. There are other services or other areas, but they have one or two of the three main, strengths of blockchain technology. But the financial services is the one that actually we started with. We actually started a company in Dubai called Excellence in Dubai International Financial Center, just for that sake, where we can actually help banks and financial services in realizing this technology, especially for settlements and financing, basically. And what we did in the report that I mentioned earlier is we divided the steps on doing a blockchain project into pre-implementation, during implementation, and post-implementation. And we identified all the challenges and what are the takeaways and expectations for each one of those three phases. And for each phases, what are the best practices and what we've realized from doing these projects firsthand. And of course, with that, we created also a research network. And that research center is actually part of the World Economic Forum. And it was a partnership with the UAE government. And we actually tackled three different projects for research. One for the Center for Research for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And that was one of the things we tackled was AI and machine learning. The second one, which I was involved with the most, was actually blockchain and distributed ledger technology, especially when it comes to supply chain and trade finance. One of the things we are going to tackle in 2021 is going to be precision medicine. And precision medicine is not directly related to blockchain, but there are blockchain aspects that can help or strength and use cases where it can help tremendously within this space, especially when it comes to DNA and privacy-related issues. One other report that we actually shared last year with the World Economic Forum, and it's available to download either from the United Arab Emirates government or from the WEF website, World Economic Forum, or through the URL and QR code that I mentioned here, is the inclusive deployment of blockchain in the UAE, the different use cases across the board, from trade finance to health to education and more. We have also recently published, as of last week or so, we have published our report on tokenization and digital assets, and this includes both STOs as well as cryptocurrencies, and the stance of the UAE from the regulatory perspective. We have interviewed more than 100 people who are decision makers in the UAE or members of free zones and startups and the public, and also thought leaders within the blockchain space on what they see the UAE doing in this space and what they see Dubai playing as a role as well in this ecosystem, and how can they align themselves strategically with this technology and the thought leaders within it. And this is an overview of the report. And we actually looked at 3 different use cases, one within real estate, and then the second and third are within financial services, more specifically venture capital and financial services in general. And what we did as well in Dubai to support technologies such as blockchain technology, what we realized is that we need digital identity for blockchain projects to succeed. There is an element of KYC, an element of identifying the person, because when you use real cash, you actually see the person that you're giving the cash to, and in the virtual world you don't have that same identity associated with whenever you do any money transaction. So when you have something like digital identity, you can rest assured that whoever you're paying money to, you can identify them, that you don't send to the wrong wallet, for example. And this was missing for years, actually, within the blockchain space. And a lot of people send money to the wrong addresses. There are a lot of people that created shorter addresses or humanly understandable addresses, and they've been selling for a lot of money as well in some of the projects, like in Ethereum, for example, with the name and addresses that were premium, that you could actually bid on. So what we created in Dubai is something called UAE Pass. And UAE Pass is our vision for how we perceive identity, not only for blockchain, but in general across all government services. So UAE Pass is your single sign-on into every government service. It is your single wallet where you pay for all government services. You tie it up with whatever a wallet you have, and you can pay for any service in the same application. It is your digital vault where you can store all your documents, and you can pull documents from government departments that are already digitally signed by those government departments. So there is no room for fake or forgery or even manipulation. You can pull and push both of them. You can sign documents. You can verify documents that have been signed within the platform or any time where you have root certificate authorities that are recognized worldwide by providers such as Adobe, Google, and others, and these root certificate authority, what is known as the CAB forum. And also we had, as with blockchain technology and strategy within the UAE, where we had to have every applicable government department's blockchain use case on the realized by 2020. We also had this initiative that we have everyone has to be paperless 100% by 2021, and also they have to use our e-wallet solution and the APIs provided by them to pay for all the government services. You cannot pay for any government services within Dubai without tapping into the e-wallet ecosystem. So traditional payments are already out of the window by end of 2021. We have also created in Dubai something called the Dubai Future Councils, where we look at different aspects of society and life within the UAE, and more specifically Dubai, when it comes to education, security, humanitarian aids, media, and even blockchain, where I sit on that council as well, where we try to tackle both blockchain-related and cryptocurrency, more specifically related issues within the space. And within that council, actually, I was nominated to be part of the Global Future Council on Cryptocurrencies, which is a working group within the World Economic Forum that tries to tackled all these, friction points for cryptocurrency adoption across the world. And one of the members is actually Visa, and Visa just announced yesterday that they are actually taking on cryptocurrencies and accepting them, and some of the projects that they are piloting right now, which is a huge move. And also we know about PayPal, and they started accepting cryptocurrencies for payments in the US. So the world is changing, and the momentum for cryptocurrency adoption is actually being realized as we speak. And I think the corona virus has increased the need for people to be more digital, and has actually moved the needle where it has reached some kind of a tipping point when it comes to mass adoption for this technology. In Dubai, we have tried some stuff and we have failed, but we have tried and continue to try, and we have succeeded in some of the projects. We were very ambitious when we started doing blockchain projects. We started with more than 140 different projects, and what we realized out of those were 40 projects that are still surviving. That doesn't mean that we are a failure. That means that we strive to try, we dare to try, we have the regulations and the regulation labs, and they call it lab for a reason, where we can try these things in an environment where it is controlled without harming anyone. And at the same time, if it succeeds, we can actually expand that experiment into a real life scenario where we can actually utilize that technology. We have also looked at different jurisdictions around the world and what they do when it comes to the regulation of cryptocurrencies, because this is a very, fresh space, and there will be, like I said, a lot of trial and error. So when it comes to financial services, the Dubai takes a bit of a careful approach to it, but we continue to look at what other people around the world, including in our own neighborhood, do in this kind of space. And we've looked at both ADGM, Bahrain, Malta, and the United Kingdom, and we compared the laws within these jurisdictions, and to see and to ease to the money providing businesses within cryptocurrencies, to show them what are the differences and what is the best jurisdiction for their particular use case. And we've done this with our partner law firm within the Dubai Blockchain Center, Calm Legal, and also our partners within those jurisdictions of Malta and the United Kingdom, where we actually looked at their laws, and we actually recommend some companies to be based out of those different jurisdictions, depending, of course, on their needs. And I would like to take this opportunity also to invite you to join our Future Blockchain Summit, which is from the 6th to the 9th of December, which is in 3 days. It is both a virtual and in-person event, and it is a huge event with big names in blockchain and cryptocurrencies showing up for it, as well as from traditional financial services. It's run along the same venue with two other conferences, which are GISEC, which is the Gulf Information Security Conference and Exhibition, as well as GITEX, which is the Middle East, if not the world's biggest computer and technology expo. And all of them happen within the same 4 days, 6th to 9th of December. So we look forward to seeing you there virtually, at least. And if you need more information about Dubai Blockchain Center, you can visit us at dbcc.ae, or you can just take a camera photo of the QR code. That's it for my talk, and thank you for listening.
All right, Mr. Al-Zarouni, many thanks for your keynote. It was very interesting to hear from Dubai, actually, what is going on. Before we start, if you have at home questions for Mr. Al-Zarouni or for the upcoming speakers, on the right side of your screen, there is a nifty drop-down menu where you can leave your questions. You can also ask them via the Twitter, of course, the hashtag DBW2020, and our website dutchblockchainweek.com/Q, and it will end up in this studio. Mr. Al-Sarouni, it was really interesting what you mentioned about medicine, of course, and the impact of blockchain on medicine. Yesterday, we had also a thought leader from the World Economic Forum speaking about blockchain. I've read that you, as a serial entrepreneur, also found a social impact solution for organ and blood donation on the blockchain. Is that correct?
Yes, so one of the projects that we did in Dubai was actually called Donor Health Tech. In the UAE, it was rebranded to Hayat, and Hayat in Arabic means life. And it's basically the Ministry of Health in the UAE took over that project actually completely. So we handed over the code after we finished the pilot with them. The pilot lasted almost a year and was for organ donation. So organ matching using DNA, as well as recalling, blood bags that were actually contaminated or had any issues with, which was a huge problem. It seems trivial, right? But it actually was a huge problem that if somebody donated blood, tracking who donated and where it went and the life cycle and provenance of that sample was really, really hard.
Yeah. It was interesting. You mentioned that the Dubai government executed over 140 projects, amongst which the digital identity. It is also the key priority for the Dutch government, the self-sovereign identity within the blockchain atmosphere. If we look to this identity, is this, according to you, the most exciting blockchain implementation in Dubai so far? Or what is it, according to you?
I think the main thing for us in Dubai was actually getting the regulators to understand the technology. A lot of times people have this bad stigma around Bitcoin, especially, that it is actually used for mischievous reasons. And even if you have that project that we talked about, Hayat, the Hayat by itself changed how people perceive that technology. Hayat showed a use case that could not be solved with traditional means. And even if you could, it would be really complicated solution. Blockchain just made it that much easier. It made it a seamless project. Nobody believed us in the beginning that it actually can be done. And then when we actually did it, they were like, wow, it is so simple. How can nobody thought of this before? And how come it's not done across the world? I mean, sovereign identity and identifying anything from a person to a thing to an Internet of Things item, everything can be done, can be identified. NFTs is a huge example of that, and you can identify real world items as well as digital items as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. What I've also read is that the Dubai government really is pushing on the collaboration with the industry. So is in close collaboration, developing all these projects with the industry. What is the key lesson that we can learn in the Netherlands from these collaborations in Dubai?
I think speed. In Dubai, what we have is a cohort-based system where we take projects in batches. And we have 7 to 8 weeks sometimes for the projects, which seems impossible everywhere else in the world. But we take on these projects, we vet them, and we run them. We call it a PPP model, a public-private partnership. We bring the government department that needs this use case to be solved, and we bring in the best people in the world through a contest-based system, and we base them in Dubai. Within those 7 to 8 weeks, they have to actually solve the problem and have the MVP ready by then. And then they sign a longer-term project, usually 6 months to 1 year, to actually realize the full potential of that project.
Okay.
And it's been working so far.
Yeah. Well, we could see also from your presentation. Mr. Al-Sarouni, many thanks again for sharing your insights live from Dubai. We were very happy having you with us, and hopefully also for you. We hope to see you soon in the Netherlands in a physical way, if it is permitted. Also, thank you for the kind invitation for the Dubai Summit. We will share the hyperlink and, of course, also the other hyperlinks that you've shared in your presentation via our social media channel. Many thanks again, and wishing you a great day in Dubai. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. Let's go on with our next speaker from Dubai. We're flying to New York City. and we're going into Consensus. Consensus is a global leader in the blockchain space. It is a global community of developers, businessmen, programmers, journalists, lawyers, etc. And it's made to create and promote the blockchain infrastructure and peer-to-peer applications. It's employing some of the brightest minds of the industry, amongst which Vanessa Scheele. Vanessa is an executive director at Consensus. She's a global executive with over 18 years of expertise in financial services and the tech industry. At Consensus, she focuses on enterprise and strategic initiatives, as well as the social impact activities, on which we are, of course, very eager to learn what she has to tell this about. Vanessa, welcome to the Dutch Blockchain Week.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today with you.
All right. I would say take it from here. We see the presentation now in our screens.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I'm going to kick it off. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, Jan. This is a really great event. And I want to say that to the previous speaker, Consensus had the privilege of being in one of the accelerators of the Dubai Financial Center. So confirming that it's a very dynamic space. So today I'm going to talk to you about social impact and blockchain. What I will do is give you a general overview and then dive into some of the use cases that we see emerging that I think would be interesting to share today. So as I said, my name is Vanessa Scheele. I'm an executive director. I'm actually the head of the Global Alliances and Channels, but I'm also the president of the Blockchain for Social Impact Coalition, which was started about 3 years ago, where we bring together technologists, impact investors, government to really test and iterate use cases for blockchain and social impact. We have an annual conference each year. We do an annual event for Earth Day, and we have an annual incubator, which this year is going to focus on supply chains. So briefly, to give you an overview of where we see the most activity in in social impact. The members of our Blockchain for Social Impact Coalition initially told us that they wanted to focus on 4 key areas. The first one was identity and vulnerable populations. As it's been alluded to, 1 billion people in the world don't have identity today, and therefore don't have access to bank accounts, don't have the possibility to attest of their credit worthiness. We also have a lot of people who are being displaced all over the world, and a very large refugee populations for which, solutions need to be found. So our members thought that, the identity issue was key for the development of blockchain solution. Adjacent to that is financial inclusion. If you don't have identity, it's very hard for you to access a bank account and to save money or to be able to get a loan. So access to financial institution or access to alternative means of finance is really key. And people think that blockchain can play a big role, either whether it's remittances or just accessing more financial creditworthiness. The third one is supply chain. As we've seen today, and with COVID, a lot of the supply chains are not very transparent. And it's a big concern for a lot of manufacturing companies, for a lot of consumer-facing companies, where their clients are requesting that the goods that they produce are created in a fair and transparent manner, being that there's no human trafficking in the supply chain, there's no human right violation, that there's a guarantee that the products are ethically sourced. So in that vein, blockchain can bring some transparency and some traceability solutions. The fourth one is energy and environment. There's been a lot of concerns about blockchain itself and its sustainability because, the proof of work mechanism of Bitcoin and Ethereum is energy intensive. But in blockchain, some people are trying to focus on that. And for Ethereum, for example, Ethereum is going from proof of work to proof of stake. But there are also other solutions that I'll give some examples of that are focusing on carbon offset and streamlining the way that we consume energy. So those were the four first key areas. And then over the years, a few other areas emerged, which I think are pretty exciting. The first one is how to support human rights activists and activists in general. So things like fake news, freedom of speech, the security and confidentiality about the information that these human rights groups are trying to, show to the world. There's a lot of projects in that area. Then the second one is democracy and voting. As you've seen in my country right now, there's a lot of issues and questions about whether the voting process is fair and transparent. And there are some projects that are trying to tackle this to get electronic voting secured by blockchain. It's an emerging area, but it's gaining some traction. And then on the philanthropic side, we've seen that a lot of donors or impact investors really want to see how their money is used, right? And ensuring that it's not diverted for other purposes. Same thing when governments give large grants, et cetera. So there are solutions through the blockchain that allow you to trace the origin of the funds and the usage and also measure the impact of that. And finally, on the education side, and I think it was alluded to prior to my speech, is that education is going to be transformed dramatically in the coming years. And we've seen the impact of COVID. And so the ability to attest with security and transparency of your skills, your continued education, and your diplomas is really important. So moving on to sort of the key use cases that I'm going to go through. I'm going to start with payments, CBDCs, and financial inclusion. Because of the advent of Libra last year, it has triggered a lot of projects and a lot of initiatives from governments, from incumbent companies, and from startups. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of what the innovation is in that space. So the first one is stablecoins. We know that Libra is going to announce their solution in January. And for those who are not well versed in stablecoins, what are they? They are cryptocurrencies that are backed by either another fiat, so dollar or yen or euro. They can also be backed by other cryptocurrencies, or they can be purely based on algorithms and mathematical calculations. So one of the two of the most famous existing stablecoins are MakerDAO and USDC. MakerDAO has a stablecoin called DAI, which is cryptocurrency backed, and then USDC, which is one-to-one to the US dollar, and that Visa is currently collaborating with. Then we have Libra, who just initially started, and initially Libra was going to be backed by a basket of fiat currencies, and that created a lot of emotion in the government and central bank circles to understand what would be the implications of such a huge player with 2 billion customers who could give access to this cryptocurrency globally. So a huge impact. And then other projects like Scheele, who is creating a stable coin that allows you to transact internationally seamlessly. So we've seen the emergence of these players, but we've also seen the emergence of more traditional players that are coming into the space. So as my previous speaker said, Visa, PayPal are really getting into the space. Square has been involved for a while, and JP Morgan, who created Quorum, which Consensus just acquired, has something called JPM Coin, which allows interbank settlements. So what do these stable coins allow you to do? So basically, if you have a wallet, and another person also has a digital wallet, you're able to send the store of value across borders seamlessly, instantaneously, without counterparty risk. And that's really, really important, and that's really the innovation. So it allows you to do remittances at a very low price compared to other existing solutions where the highest can go up to 15% of the amount that's been sent. So that's really exciting. There are some issues that need to be dealt with. Is if I send you a cryptocurrency, but in my country I can't buy anything with the cryptocurrency, how do I transfer it into the local currency? So that's sort of the fiat to crypto on-ramp issues. And then there's a lot of questions around AML and KYC. And reaching the last mile. And those are really the issues that we are trying to tackle on the social impact side, is how do you reach someone who's in a place with low connectivity, no cell phone, no identity? How do we get them value across through aid or through direct payments? And so I think there will be a lot of innovation in that side. I'm going to give a few examples afterwards, but wanted to touch base on also what the governments are doing. There's over 80 central banks that are looking at CBDC. So a CBDC is a central backed digital currency. And it's used in 3 real use cases. One is wholesale payments, which is more intrabank. The second one is retail payments, so that you're allowed to pay directly to individuals, and individuals can use that CBDC like they use cash. And then there's the idea that you could use it also for cross-border payments. Consensus has been involved with 6 central banks for the time being and is experimenting in all 3 areas. And so there's the promise that through CBDC or stable coins, we'll be able to reach the last mile, to bring in people into financial inclusion, that having access to this growing digital economy is going to include more people. And that cash currently doesn't allow for this innovation. So we're far from all the central banks issuing right now the CBDCs. We're also part of the WEF working group on digital currencies. And I think there's a lot of exploration, a lot of excitement, and a lot of thought leadership going into this. But I think it will take several years in order to see an evolution. But I think that will be sort of our future together. So I'll give you just one example of how cryptocurrencies was used for distribution of aid. That was in Vanuatu with Oxfam. They used the MakerDAO's cryptocurrency stablecoin DAI. And basically what was really important for that project, which is expanding, is that the experience of the citizens receiving the aid was the same as if they were, receiving money, and their dignity and the way they shopped and the way they engaged with the world was not changed. So we think that's really important because it allowed faster onboarding of the citizens into that project, and it allowed for a lot of cost efficiencies. People were engaged and were able to use that Android app very, very quickly. So I think, when you think about the last mile and social impact is measuring how effective all these blockchain-based solutions are. Another one is the World Food Program, who has an amazing project called Building Blocks that started with aid disbursement in Jordan. Basically, they were able to transfer directly the aid from WFP to the place of disbursement and the supermarkets that the refugees had access to. It was a very sophisticated program where refugees are identified by their iris scan because they're all in a camp and they have access to specific areas where they can go and shop. But by doing that, by using a cryptocurrency and transferring value through cryptocurrency, the WFP was allowed to save a lot of money, not having to go through local banks and correspondent banks to transfer the assets. The second thing I want to touch upon is sustainable supply chains. I think it's a really growing area of social impact, and we see a lot of examples there. I'll give a few. The first one was a project we did with the World Wildlife Fund to track and trace a red tuna in Fiji. So red tuna is quite an expensive item, and people want to make sure of the quality of the tuna and want to make sure that it was sustainably sourced. As you know, in the fishing industry, there's a lot of issues around human rights abuse, but also issues around how the fish is sourced and how the fish is brought to different places in the world, making sure that there's no break in the temperature chain, etc. And so via blockchain and IoT devices, we were able to do that and demonstrated, where the fish came from, how it was sourced, how it was shipped, and giving comfort to the consumers that it was ethically sourced. So there's a lot of, this is one of the projects, there's a lot of projects that are going on right now in the world around fishing or coffee or other goods that are being manufactured, where we want to make sure that, one, it's ethically sourced, but also trying to rebalance a little bit the economics to make sure that people who are the producers also get their fair share. We did another project with Levi's and Harvard around, and New America around apparel workers' rights, where we did a pilot in Mexico to test some confidential surveys that they were doing with their workers. So in order to see if there's any abuse in a factory, there's a standard survey that people take that ask the workers about their work conditions. But the issue is, if they're being the source of abuse, they're often scared to say what's happening, et cetera. So through a blockchain system, we were allowed to get the information and the survey out completely confidentially, and ensuring that the workers understood that they're able to say if there is an issue, and increase the quality of the auditors of the factory to make sure that the health and safety of the workers was maintained. The third use case I want to speak about, which is dear to my heart, is a transparency use case with corruption. This was actually a pilot from the World Economic Forum, which was done on the Ethereum public blockchain to solve for an issue around corruption. And this specific case was around corruption for public schools. So they had an issue where the food that was provided to the children and the meals that were provided to the children were provided at a very unusual high cost. And they realized that, for example, the chicken was purchased at 50% more than and invoiced to the school at 50% higher price than the normal price. And so the WEF and the government of Colombia did this pilot on the public chain to understand the entire procurement process and increase the transparency and the integrity of the records. So from the bidding to the choice of the bidders to the disclosure, they created a system where it was much more difficult for people to change their records, change the bids that they put in, after colluding, et cetera, and bringing a lot of more transparency. There's an entire report on the World Economic Forum website that you can see and really gets you to understand all the challenges of blockchain, but also all the benefits. And finally, this will be my last example. I want to talk a little bit about climate change and carbon. So there's a lot of projects around our carbon footprint. As you know, a lot of companies have been asked by their shareholders to justify their carbon assumption and ensure that they have a sustainable business. So large companies like KPMG, like Microsoft, are committing to being carbon neutral in the future. But it's very hard as a very large company to do that and to understand all your carbon footprint and how you can offset it. So KPMG has been working with All Infra and Context Labs to announce a new solution that allows organizations to measure, report, and offset greenhouse emissions. So it's called the Climate Accounting Infrastructure, and it's a transparent platform to complement the organization's existing systems, including IoT, sensors, and other data sources and oracles that you can use to measure your carbon footprint. So very exciting developments. They're not the only ones. Again, there's a lot of projects, and I think it's very exciting that there's a lot of projects. And so if you want to learn more, they have issued, I think, a report on it, and you can also contact me. The last example. Oh, okay, I'm done. If that was my last example. Is a bounties network where we incentivize people in the Philippines to clean up ocean trash. And so people were paid directly with cryptocurrencies, were able to take photos, timestamp them, geolocate them, and say that they had cleaned up this amount of trash, and being able to be paid directly.
Okay. All right, Vanessa, thank you so much. For me, the social impact has always intrigued me the most when it comes to blockchain technology. And I think you gave just from your point of view, from the consensus point of view, like a great overview of all the impact areas and the current status about identity, financial inclusion, and so forth. Thank you so much. For me, it was very interesting to learn the current status and all the projects that are currently being executed globally. You are currently executing a variety of projects with organizations like the World Wildlife Fund, with the World Food Programme, Oxfam, and so forth. Of course, very curious to learn what will happen in the upcoming year. What is the project that you are the most excited about? The social impact project.
So we're going to do a very large supply chain incubator, and I think that's one area that I feel is very exciting, because there's so much that you can change in supply chains with blockchain solutions. So we'll see what comes out of this incubator and how it can help existing solutions or create new solutions.
Especially now with the corona crisis, we've seen how vulnerable the supply chains actually are on the global perspective. You're working a lot with all kinds of organizations on the global scale. What is the key reason why organizations maybe are still hesitant to actually join a blockchain collaboration efforts? Why are they not participating? Are there any reasons that you still have to, or obstructions that you still need to tackle?
So I think there are several layers. One is the misconception with, general cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. So I think we're a little bit past that, but there's still some legacy, misperception. The second one is the regulatory environment. People, if they're not sure that they can execute a project in payments, et cetera, they're going to be a little bit hesitant. The third one is not every company has a very large IT team that they can dedicate to innovation. And so going beyond the pilot is something that requires a real investment by the company. It's a new software they're deploying, right? And so at the beginning of blockchain, there were not a lot of off-the-shelf solutions, which was easy for companies to deploy. I think we are past that, and we are getting more solutions out there that people can just use, and not everyone needs to create their own solution. I think that's something that's a big hurdle that we've passed. But those are the things people think about. Yeah. And also the return on investment, of course.
Of course. Yeah, in the end, we all need to make money, of course. So last year, we still had a physical Dutch Blockchain Week. And we also hosted a session with people from the Blockchain for Social Impact initiative, where you're also part of. You hosted a virtual event in Q2 this year. We still hear from people via the social media channels, via our chat box, that people, they're quite interested in this initiative. Are there any ways how they can actually engage in these initiatives? Is there like an upcoming event or a hackathon or anything like that?
Yes, so we'll be announcing our Earth Day event on April 22nd. So that will be a live stream event. If you want to speak at this event, if you want to participate, if you want to volunteer, we're all volunteers in this organization. So we're happy to take any help we can. So that's one. The second one is the upcoming incubator that's going to start in February. If you have an idea, if you're a hacker or a social entrepreneur or an impact fund and you want to participate as a mentor or as a participant, you can sign up, and I'll be sharing that. And you can also become a member and really drive the conversation on certain, sectors. Let's say you want to drive forward projects in the sustainability and climate change. We have a dedicated group for that.
Wonderful. Vanessa Grenay, thank you so much for joining us from New York City. I was really impressed by your presentation. We will share the hyperlinks also about the initiative later on at our social media channels. Thanks again. Keep on doing all the great work, and we hope to meet you soon in the Netherlands in a physical form.
I hope so too.
All right. Take care. Thanks. A voluntary initiative. This Dutch Blockchain Week is also a voluntary initiative, and I can't stress it enough. I really would like to thank also our marketing communications team, making sure that all the posts are being shared at all our channels. Vladimir, Wojtek, and Mitch, thanks for all your work. All right, let's go quickly from Dubai. We went to New York, and now we're going to South Africa. The African continent has always amazed me with their leapfrogging of technologies. Also, blockchain has an incremental impact on the continent, and numerous initiatives and startups are being launched constantly. we're very keen to learn what's actually going on in the African continent, in the African blockchain scene, and what is next. With us today is Meryl Ford. Meryl has developed the national blockchain strategy for the country of South Africa. And she has a great overview of all the projects, all the social impact initiatives on the African continent. So Meryl, thank you so much for joining us from South Africa today. Welcome to the Dutch Blockchain Week stage.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. Absolutely amazing.
Wonderful.
So yeah, let me start off. You can't read that. I'm not sure what's happened to my presentation there, but basically it says blockchain in Africa. Can we walk the talk? So, I mean, I believe we can walk the talk, but I think we have to kind of do some very interesting stuff. I want to start off with maybe giving everyone kind of a picture that I drew to kind of help me understand how we can tackle the whole 4IR emergence. What I'd love to see is kind of an Africa 4.0 or 4.0. But I think many people think that this is all about the technology. But actually, it's the interaction between the technology, between new business models that become possible, between society and different skills that will eventually be needed, for example. And most importantly, it's also issues around governance. How do you actually create policy in this kind of ever-changing world? So yeah, I thought I'd just start off with that, just so that people can see my perspective on things. So will Africa 4.0 be driven by its entrepreneurs? I'll be talking a bit about that. I will talk about some national initiatives that are happening from various countries in Africa, and then some thoughts on how Africa moves from these small proof of concepts to actual real implementation out there. Yeah, okay, don't see that slide either. Okay, there we go. So the spirit of entrepreneurship is alive and well and living in Africa. We have very dynamic and adventurous young people open to taking risks. I think as everywhere else in the world, the young people are our future. They know how to move forward and how to think outside of the box. They come from a totally different environment that I do, for example. So Africa is a home to a number of emerging blockchain and crypto communities. Blockchain hubs are emerging in Kenya, in South Africa, Nigeria, and many other countries, and they're growing steadily. It's a very exciting environment at the moment. I think what makes them perhaps slightly different, and we saw the previous presentation, which basically spoke about a blockchain for social good. What we're seeing is the local blockchain players and developers are using the technology to tackle social, economic, and political problems. So they're kind of using the environment they're in as an incentive and as an opportunity to change the status quo. And that's what makes it so very exciting. And you'll see a bit more about the kinds of things that are being done. So I'm going to talk about two projects. They are live in Nigeria and in South Africa, Yoma and Zolto. So Yoma is short for the Youth Agency Marketplace, and what makes it exciting is that it's using verifiable digital credentials to help African youth build up their digital CVs, and to also do a kind of an employment matching activity where they enable them to use these digital CVs to find employment that matches their skills. Zloto is, and they've linked up with Zloto, so these two startups are kind of working together. Zloto is a platform that is using blockchain technology to increase engagement amongst youth and to track positive behavior. So they have a whole lot of reward systems, and these rewards, they come in the form of vouchers, and they can be redeemed across 3,000 stores in South Africa. Another project that I was quite excited about is that of COVID ID. I was involved in the project in the early stages. It kind of emerged out of the whole COVID-19 issue within the world, and the realization that so many of these solutions don't take all the context into consideration when they get developed. So many of the solutions are high tech. In Africa, for example, smartphone penetration is low. I think we're running at about 55% of penetration in the whole of Africa. So that provides kind of innovation opportunities to figure out, how can we actually enable everyone to access these kinds of innovations. So COVID ID kind of emerged out of that whole environment. There were about 150 volunteers, the same as Consensus was speaking about. So there were volunteers, there were developers, there were some of our bankers in the country, entrepreneurs, students, and they focused on a privacy-first methodology. So the idea was that users could prove their COVID-19 status reliably and securely with complete protection of privacy. And the way in which they did that was to use a QR code. So you would be able to go to a website or even do it on your phone if you do have a smartphone, register for the COVID ID, and you enter your status. You assign a QR code. And then what you could do is you could actually print that QR code. So if someone doesn't have a smartphone, they could, for example, print it at their work or go to an environment where you could actually print these codes. So then whenever they enter a public place, so if they go onto a bus or a taxi or they visit a supermarket, the code gets scanned in by let's say, a security guard, and it generates a geolocation receipt and the date and time, and it's saved either on their device or by a company that actually offers custodial services. So the idea is that if you are confirmed positive after you visited a place, you would actually inform authorities using the app, and everyone who was in the same place at the same time would then be alerted. So, and it also keeps kind of a record of where you were over the past few days, let's say the past 10 days, and those people that were at the same places then would also be alerted. This is kind of to help people because, if you test positive and you have to remember where you were 10 days ago, I mean, that's not always possible. So, we were very excited about that. We did our best to get government excited about it and get involved. But ultimately, government went with the Google and Apple Bluetooth solutions, even though actually, knowing that many people didn't have access to phones, to smartphones, never mind smartphones with Bluetooth as well. And also the issue about, what's the possibility of two people running the same app, being close enough to each other to send a Bluetooth signal. But it ended with something very good because it's now been integrated into the MIT open source path check solution. So it makes provision for countries around the world where there isn't a high cell phone penetration. Another very exciting project is the project called Registry. And basically the aim of that is to connect students, universities and employers via privacy reserving technologies. So the problem they solved is that student data is highly sensitive, and universities spend large sums on maintaining the integrity of their student database. Employers, when they need to check and when they're trying to find potential candidates for employment, currently, well, before they did the solution, they would have to phone the university to check on the qualifications. And in fact, the university that this came out of actually eventually had a whole call center, and all they did was actually answer phone calls. So this is got huge potential, and it's currently running at about 5 universities in South Africa. The next project is also something that's very close to my heart. It's extremely African, if I can put it that way. It's something that talks to the African experience, and it's a small startup called Coronet, and what they do is they've developed an ethical human hair supply chain platform, and you might not realize this, but the human hair market in Africa alone is around $1 billion. And I mean, some of the stats, so out of the total 100 million units, 38 million human hair pieces are sold to 24 million African consumers annually. And there's lots of issues around counterfeit hair. So the whole market, the whole human hair market is kind of an informal market in Africa. So that causes a lot of problems because they can't, for example, insure their salons. They can't get funding and invest. They can't get loans from banks, etc. So the Coronet blockchain platform was developed in partnership with IBM to create an end-to-end transparent supply chain with ethical human hair products. So the ultimate aim is to use this technology to accelerate the African salon sector into a bankable formal economy. They're about to pilot in South Africa, and they're very keen to pilot in Kenya as well. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that particular solution. And then something maybe not quite from a startup or an entrepreneur. There's some kind of really good entrepreneurial work happening in the financial sector in South Africa as well. And, believe it or not, they've actually managed to get the banks to actually talk to each other and kind of work together in a kind of pre-competitive fashion. So 5 of the banks basically got together with some insurance companies. They're part of what's known as the South African Financial Blockchain Consortium, and they're working on a self-sovereign identity solution. The first solution that they've developed was aimed at reducing the costs of a repeating KYC process. So people get identity wallets. They get kind of digital identities that they can actually use at any of the participating banks. The solution used Hyperledger, Indian Aries, and the Sovereign Network. Okay. Yep. My introductory slides don't seem to show up, but that's fine. I'll go on to the next one. So there have been some national initiatives happening around Africa as well. We're getting a lot of requests. For example, recently we actually did a strategy for the African Union on the 4IR, and blockchain was one of the technologies that they wanted to focus on. However, many of them are still bottom up, the initiatives. But, I think that we will eventually get there. Just to kind of talk about some of the stuff that's happening at a national level. The previous speaker spoke about CBDCs. Well, I think a lot of countries, Rwanda, Ghana, South Africa, Kenya, and Mauritius, are busy looking at CBDCs. Many of them have set up regulatory sandboxes. If you look at South Africa, which is kind of my experience because that's where I'm from, they've developed something very interesting. They developed a position paper on crypto asset regulation, and what's quite exciting about that was the way in which they went about it. So instead of sitting behind closed doors and kind of coming up with something that didn't make sense, they went through a massive campaign to get the private sector, to get the fintech sector involved, and they actually created an environment, which I will talk about a bit later on. And then just last week, the Financial Sector Conduct Authority published a draft declaration of crypto assets as a financial product under the Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act. So that is quite a major step forward for the country, in my opinion, because it actually looks at, at least it makes an attempt to kind of define what a crypto asset is. And then the South African Blockchain Alliance has been started, so that's a multi-stakeholder approach. And then, of course, we have the WEF C4R, the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, sits in South Africa, and there's another one in Rwanda as well. So, yeah, that's exciting work coming from that environment. There's still gaps. There's a lot happening around digital ID amongst the banks, but, they're finding it quite hard to engage government, which is a great pity. But I think that, SANBA is kind of working quite hard to persuade government to kind of look at digital ID, and there's talk of a digital ID innovation center being established that will kind of bring all the parties together. The next thing that I think is a huge opportunity in Africa is the whole issue around digital trade and trade finance via the blockchain. A lot of the very initial pilots that IBM did was actually done, I think, from Kenya, between Kenya and the Netherlands, actually. They looked at kind of moving, I think it was flowers, fresh flowers from Kenya to the Netherlands, and that went very well. And also the other thing that we should also note is that we've just had the African Continental Free Trade Agreement agreed to, so there's going to be a lot of action in this environment as well. Okay, and then I said I would talk more about how the South African Reserve Bank went about getting interest and getting buy-in and getting input from the various role players in South Africa. So they created the Intergovernmental FinTech Working Group, the IFWG, and what they've done as well, very, very impressively, is to actually establish a FinTech incubator. And what I also need to say, it's not only is, the IFWG consists of government players as well. So all the financial sector regulators have got together, the Financial Intelligence Center, the National Credit Regulator, the South African Reserve Bank, and the South African Revenue Services. So, they've managed to get together with a common goal. Very exciting things happening with the innovation hub that they've established. So it offers a regulatory guidance unit to help innovators resolve specific questions. There's a regulatory sandbox that's been set up, which allows market innovators to actually test their products. And then there's an innovation accelerator that they've established as well to kind of try and get people to work a lot more across the various boundaries. And then the Project Corker was something that was also done by our Reserve Bank. And basically it was looking at interbank transactions. They've won various awards for what they did. They kind of added to the blockchain body of knowledge by creating new algorithms, for example. So they basically showed that it's technically feasible to process wholesale payments between participants with full visibility to the central bank from an operational perspective. I think what I found interesting as well is kind of the central bank, or the Reserve Bank as it's called here in South Africa, was kind of able to sit back and kind of potentially take themselves totally out of the process, because the last pilot that they did, the central bank didn't need to approve any of the transactions. It was all done through smart contracts and some smart technical development. So I'm going to talk a bit about SANBA, the South African National Blockchain Alliance, which I'm currently heading up. So I think what's important about SANBA is that it's kind of government driven. So it wasn't just a group of people kind of coming together and declaring themselves the South African National Blockchain Alliance. It actually is a true alliance between the various players in the ecosystem in South Africa. We've come up with kind of mapping the ecosystem, as you'll see over here. So kind of understanding what players the ecosystem consists of and what actions need to be taken. So the idea is to kind of SANBA is there to kind of connect all of these players in transparent ways, kind of similar to a blockchain itself, I guess. So we have four main objectives. So connecting academia, civil society, business, and government into a pre-competitive collaboration space to support research, development, and innovation in blockchain, facilitating skills development, advocacy, and education on all things blockchain, because that's still very, very, very much needed out there. People do not understand the value and the opportunities that blockchain could bring. Then looking at catalyzing blockchain adoption in all sectors of South Africa, and then looking at leveraging the blockchain ecosystem as a lobbying platform to tackle issues blocking blockchain adoption in the country. So we were only launched on the 3rd of April, so this year, when lockdown, I think we were about 3 or 4 days into lockdown. So that was an interesting experience, because we actually had to go digital within a couple of days, which we actually managed to pull off. So some of the challenges, and I think this is probably the same kind of in most countries in the world. So we're not that different. The lack of knowledge regarding blockchain's potential, this confusion about is blockchain Bitcoin and what is a cryptocurrency, and on cryptocurrencies or scams, the whole crypto bubble of 2017 kind of did a lot of harm to, well, made a lot of people rich, but it also maybe did a lot of harm to the reputation of blockchain because of this confusion between blockchain, crypto, and Bitcoin. I've also found that, we're still at that stage of, when you do a presentation to various government players or to the private sector, we're still going through that, what is blockchain? And, I think that they're far too complex for people to understand. People don't need to understand exactly how blockchain works. Most people don't know how the internet works. They just need to know what the benefit of blockchain is to them in their particular business case. Issues around infrastructure, obviously in Africa, that is a major problem. You kind of need always-on connectivity, although I have seen some examples of, applications that kind of don't need always-on connectivity. So digital infrastructure is still a major challenge. Regulation, kind of an obvious one, although I think South Africa is making great strides. And maybe setting an example for other African countries to follow if they like. This whole mindset of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay, I think that there's huge potential, but people are used to doing things in a certain way, and to change people's attitudes is one of the most difficult things you can do. So that's a major problem. And also the issue as well that, blockchain is more than a network, it's an ecosystem. You can't do blockchain on your own. If you look at supply chain, for example, there's a whole ecosystem, around the whole supply chain environment. You can't have some people in and some people out. So it's kind of this all or nothing approach, I think, that kind of scares people a lot of the time, because that costs money to kind of reinvent the way things have been done with new technologies as well. And then I think we need stronger leadership at a continental level. So I think that the European Union has done some interesting things, and we have the kind of equivalent, the African Union. So I think that we can learn a lot from the European Union, and not only what works, but maybe what doesn't work. And we need to kind of contextualize to our particular environment as well. So to take blockchain forward in Africa, I spoke about looking at it from the African Union angle. And I think that, there's multiple, and I'm sure it's the same in the EU. There are so many different frameworks and initiatives and strategies, some looking at digital transformation, some of them calling it 4IR, Agenda 2063, Science, Technology and Innovation Strategy. We need to consolidate these. I think Africa is quite good at writing really, cool documentation about what should be done, but we're not that good at actual implementation. So, that's a major problem. And, I come from a research environment, so, I know the value of research. So we need to somehow nurture research, development and innovation, and leverage that energy of Africa's youth, the can-do attitude that they have. So, my suggestion is, African-focused research agendas at higher education institutions, and, how about funding and supporting startups and entrepreneurs, and not only looking externally. Let's believe in and nurture Africa's talent. A very interesting, I saw a report the other day, it's probably the same for other countries in Africa, but where they found this weird anomaly where many of our software developers are kind of looking internationally for jobs. And they're actually working remotely and kind of providing very good technical skills and development services to international companies. And, at the same time, South African companies are actually looking externally for developers and for technical people instead of using the people that are right there around the corner. So we really need to change that kind of attitude and realize what good raw talent we have here in Africa. I've got some very specific recommended actions, which I'm not going to go into too much detail. I basically just want to say that, these are kind of based on what the EU has been doing. And I wanted to talk just very quickly about this whole concept of agile governance. And agile governance was coined and was kind of, there was a white paper written by the World Economic Forum. And, it just makes sense. I mean, it looks at active collaboration between government, civil society, academia, and the private sector to co-create the future in terms of policy and regulation in a fast developing world. It uses some of the concepts of design science, design thinking, to kind of, take an agile approach to doing new things. It looks at using incubators. It looks at using sandboxes, regulatory sandboxes, policy incubators, et cetera, And, to some extent, I think that we have a good example in South Africa. I think that when the South African Reserve Bank drove the whole intergovernmental fintech working group, they were actually doing exactly what the Agile Governance white paper was suggesting. So I think we can learn so much from them, and it can be applied in other areas and in other countries as well. So in a nutshell, I think to move blockchain forward in Africa, I believe we should leverage the energy and the creativity of our youth and the entrepreneurs. We need to be flexible, but still deliberate while we go about changing the status quo. And I believe that together we can create Africa 4.0. Thanks very much.
Meryl, thank you so much. Thank you so much joining us from South Africa. It's really great to get this overview from your side, because like in the Netherlands, we're usually a little bit in this filter bubble, seeing the implementations and the blockchain solutions in the Netherlands, in Europe, maybe some unicorns globally. But I was just sitting here silent and listening to all these great examples of not just ideas, but projects that have already been launched successfully. Thank you so much taking us on a journey throughout Africa and showing us all the incremental examples how blockchain can actually have and has already a social impact. I'm very, very curious to learn. Well, we're almost at the end of 2020, a very, very, strange year, of course, for most of us. We've seen a lot of great examples of projects that have been launched in the last year in the African continent. What is the most exciting project, the most exciting blockchain projects that will launch in the upcoming year, according to you?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So there's one project that will probably become a POC in May next year, and that's looking at the whole issue of provenance in food supply chains, and looking at food safety in particular, because we believe that, there's a kind of going to be a post-COVID world eventually. And so the South African government, for example, at the moment is looking at not only building back, but this whole focus on building back better. And food safety, food security has been a major worry throughout all the COVID lockdowns that we've had in South Africa. So to me, that's going to be extremely exciting. The idea is to link emerging farmers, small farmers, rural farmers, in a local way to consumers close to them. So, it's a project that SANBA is busy supporting and we co-funding. So, that's something that I'm becoming quite excited about.
Wonderful. So you're speaking, of course, of SANBA, the organization that you're currently also leading. You've seen multiple great collaborations happening in Africa in the past years. I'm curious to learn, what is the key lesson of all these collaborations, what really did not work out? So what is the thing where it maybe clashed between collaborative partners?
Okay. I think, I spoke about the KYC example between the banks, and that seemed to be going so well. We had about 5 banks involved. And I think that with a lot of these projects, it kind of starts with technology enthusiasts, the techies kind of in the back office, who start fiddling with blockchain, realize the potential. So I think that, so that becomes problematic to actually get the business owners and the business decision makers involved. So while that particular project was kind of just the techies kind of talking to each other across these banking barriers, it went very well. Unfortunately, then we started to see some competitive behavior between the banks, and one or two of the banks actually broke away and did their own solution, which doesn't help anyone at all because, digital identity, credentialing, etc. They're still working on interoperability guidelines. So that was quite a big disappointment to me. And also the fact that they really struggled to get buy-in from the Department of Home Affairs, who is actually responsible for identity in the country, civic identity matters. So I'm hoping that the great success, well, we had 2 pilots then, each one using different technologies, but they were both very successful. So, it's one of the reasons why we're wanting to start this digital identity innovation center or center of excellence. We're still kind of throwing the ideas around. So we need to be really careful of competitive behavior at this stage of the blockchain environment in Africa, because we can still all learn and grow in a non-competitive way.
Well, beautifully said. And little competition, couple disappointments, but I think you can be very proud of all the amazing developments in the blockchain sphere in Africa. Meryl Ford, thank you so much again for joining us live from South Africa. It was a great pleasure having you with us on the virtual stage. I'm astonished by all the amazing examples that you shared with us today. Thank you so much. Stay safe. And also for you, we hope to welcome you again at our Dutch Blockchain Week, hopefully next time in a physical form.
Be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Right.
I really, really appreciate it. Thank you
so much.
Jan. Cheers.
So we're running a little bit over time. This was the end of the second session of day 2 of the Dutch Blockchain Week. I really like to thank you again. Thank you again for joining this session. If you just tuned in or maybe already tuned in yesterday, for being with us another day. Tomorrow will be the last day of the Dutch Blockchain Week that was organized by the Blockchain Netherlands Foundation. We have 2 very exciting sessions coming up. We have speakers from CoinDesk, which is the leading blockchain news agency globally, and from the Estonian government. Two very interesting keynotes that I'm really looking forward to. And a session after that, we will hand out the Dutch Blockchain Awards. We have 6 winners in 6 categories, and they will all be invited tomorrow live in the studio, and we will have a Q&A with all the winners. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining again. I hope you really enjoyed the sessions today. If you have any feedback, please leave them on our social media channels. Use our hashtag DBW2020. We're very eager to learn what you actually thought of today, of the sessions, and we hope to see you back tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great night and see you tomorrow.